live, guys? I don't know.
Yes,
we are live, guys. How's it going, everyone? How's it going? It's your boy VeeduVidz in the house, literally in my house right now. It's 11:30 at night in the UK, 6:30 in Canada. So I am about to fall asleep, which is why this video is sponsored by sugar. So all these energy drinks, Kinder Bueno, Milky Way, strawberry something, I don't know what this is, sugary sticks and whatever. How is everyone doing, guys? Is my camera gone? Is it back?
Oh,
you're gone.
Oh, I'm okay. Oh, crap. Oh, that's a great start already. But you can hear my voice.
yes.
I am in your head. So today we are joined by two very esteemed guests. We have Abdullah Samir from Canada, and we have his friend Matthew, or we can call him Matt, I believe.
Certainly.
So thank you very much. I appreciate that. So what we're going to do today is talk about someone who is probably bigger than Elvis right now. And unless you've been living under a rock, you must have heard the name Jordan Peterson. And he is someone who I've been following for around probably over a year. And we are going to talk about a variety of topics. And one of them is, what can Muslims learn from Jordan Peterson? He is someone who I think he identifies as a Christian, or he spends a lot of time talking about the Bible, about Christ, about mythology. I mean, he's a psychology lecturer in Canada, and also he's a clinical psychologist. He's got many years of experience, so he's someone who knows what he's talking about, and he can be quite divisive. Actually, no, it is definitely divisive, depending on which part of the political spectrum you belong to, or if you're an atheist, or if you're a believer. But I think this is something which Muslims can definitely learn. He's someone who Muslims can definitely learn from. He has made religion sexy again. He's made religion interesting and cool again. I should say Christianity cool again. So what can Muslims learn from this? Now, I'm here with Abdullah Samir and Matt. So if you would like to very briefly introduce yourselves to the masses who are waiting to hear your voice and see your beautiful face, please.
Hey, everyone. I'm Abdullah Samir. I think most of you know me. Ex-Muslim for 3 years now. And yeah, that's it. If you've seen my blog and stuff, you know who I am and what I stand for. This will be an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about some good topics. So yeah, that's all I have for now. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, hi, my name is Matthew Long, and I've been a friend of Abdullah's now for a little while. We met in the atheist community, I suppose, and probably over many discussions about God and God's impact on people's lives, and religion and religious impact on people's lives, etc.
Awesome.
Great stuff, guys. Great stuff. So let's open the discussion with what your first memory, or what was the first video you watched of his, or first book? I know, Abdullah, right now you're reading, or you're going through his 12 Rules for Life book, which is I think has had some really good reviews. It's selling a lot. But my first sort of impression of Jordan Peterson was, wow, what an amazing voice. No, I'm just joking. Let's not get into that. For example, oh boy, let's hold it together. Okay, was when the whole trans stuff was happening. So, for example, in Canada, your country, they were going to pass a law, I believe, saying that, enforcing that if someone was wanted to be referred as a he or she, or ze or ge or be, that you would be compelled by the law to do so. And he said he would not do that because he would not cede that linguistic territory to the law. At the end of the day, you should be able to speak what you want and refer to people how you wish. So I was like, I was never someone who was really much into the whole trans argument. I didn't really get it, or it wasn't something that resonated with me. But the hysteria created around him was just, I think, incredibly disproportionate. And I was like, okay, so who is this guy? Let me check him out. So then I started watching his lectures, and he seemed like a very normal guy, almost too normal. But his lectures were, I found, very stimulating. When he was talking about I even remember watching one of his Lion King lectures. He was talking about Lion King, the movie, the cartoon, and it was a 2-part lecture. And the first part was like 2 hours, and the second one was like maybe an hour and a half. And I was like, bruv, the movie's only an hour and a half. How are you going to make a 4.5, analysis of a 1.5 hour movie, whatever? But I actually ended up watching the whole thing, and my mind was just blown. It was on fire. I was like, wow, man, I've never seen this movie. I can't look at it the same way again. And when he started talking about Dostoevsky, I couldn't look at it the same way again. And then when it came on to his Maps of Meanings lectures on psychology and different archetypes, which is one of his favorite words, and mythology and all these different things, and the hero, what does it mean to be the hero? Where does that idea come from in society? And it's not a big jump to go from hero to prophet, right? Because I suppose the prophet is a bigger hero or is the hero in the Abrahamic sort of context. But I came across him like that, and I thought, wow, man, this guy, he's I'm watching his Bible series, and I'm enjoying myself, and I'm not in that, back when you were, well, I'm sure Abdullah can relate as well, and I'm sure Mac as well. But growing up as a Muslim, when you used to hear someone Christian speak, it was, well, that's not true, and the Quran says that, and and this point, and that's not scientifically true, and the Trinity's false. Instead of having that reaction to it, which was trying to disprove him or trying to say, well, that's wrong or that's not factually correct, I just sort of relaxed and just let it, whatever he was saying, let it hit me. And I felt that was the way he was delivering the message, where I could sort of take everything he was saying. And like I said, he just flipped the script. I think he's talking about religion the right way, which is use it as a text to interpret. It's part of our myth culture or myth literature as human beings that we've collected over the centuries, over thousands of years, not even centuries. And there is some deeper meaning hidden in it, but you have to go beyond the surface. So on that note, guys, you're more than welcome to jump in and take it where you want to take it.
I'll go first. So Jordan Peterson is an interesting fellow. I'm not totally quite sure what to make of him just yet. Like you said, he's quite divisive in some ways. Some of the things he said, has caused a lot of controversy. And what I'm finding interesting is just how popular he is. And, he's filling a great need in the community of some sort. So to me, the question is, what is it that he's bringing to the table? What is it that he has? And it's quite interesting. Like he's definitely extracted a lot of what we can call wisdom from these stories, right? He's a great orator. He's great at speaking, and he has the ability not just to do that, but he's also able to look into anthropology and a little bit of scientific history on evolution. He always pulls in evolution or evolutionary history.
Lobster.
And then there's a whole thing about gender roles, and I have a little bit more to say about that, but speaking about just specifically about religion in general, I have this kind of reaction which surprises me sometimes, which is I get irritated when I hear people criticizing Islam, and especially when it's very shallow criticism. It really pisses me off. Oh, you guys believe in the man that went on a donkey? Ho ho ho! Like, I'm just like, oh my God, like just be quiet. Just get out of here. Like, oh, he went on a donkey to the moon. Like, really, guys, like get a life. Like it just becomes a big ego battle, right? At that point,
Yeah.
you're just bashing them with your stick, your religion stick, your atheism stick, actually. It's like you have this big stick that I'm better than you, right? And your ego is coming out and you're like, yeah, you're so dumb. You believe in this nonsense. Ha ha ha, right? And I think this kind of shallow perspective, looking at things in this way, is definitely problematic, because there are probably good lessons you can take from any book, right? Any book, any story, any lesson, any story, like even Aesop's fables or whatever, right? And when we look at it like that, right? When we look at it from that perspective, maybe there is some wisdom in the Quran, right? Maybe there are some good things in there, and I definitely do think there are good things in the Quran. It's not only all garbage, right?
So, sorry, on that note, or on that point, what can Muslims learn from Jordan Peterson, or what can Islam learn from Jordan Peterson?
I guess not looking at things from a very superficial perspective. One of the kind of claims that Muslims have come up with, and I think it's a modern claim, is this whole scientific miracles jargon. The Muslims are saying that the Quran is full of scientific miracles. It's God put these like embryology in there, and whatever, like 7 layers of atmosphere. Some people say 7 heavens, and so silly. And for example, the darkness in the water and the darkness of the sea. Like, people find miracles in everything, in the shape of the earth, and I think what they're doing is they're actually projecting a certain perspective on the Quran that I don't actually think the Quran is coming with in the first place. I don't actually think the Quran is there to teach us science, is even there to demonstrate new knowledge. Muhammad, when he came with this book, it was more like, don't they ponder on the creation of the heavens and the earth? Don't they see the beauty in the world? It's basically like calling for intelligent design and saying, oh, there's a creator. And then, of course, they're saying creator is Allah, and Allah said you have to obey me. So, I'm the prophet, so you have to obey me. But, my God is the one that made all of this stuff. But it's not a scientific, that science thing is a modern kind of phenomenon that needs to die. And thankfully it is dying. It's going away. But this kind of superficial, look at the holy books is, I think, not really good. And maybe Muslims could take a look at bringing forward something else from there, not just like scientific miracles, right? That camel is dead now.
Yeah, we've definitely slaughtered that camel for Eid many, many times. Matthew, is there anything you want to add to that?
So I haven't heard Jordan Peterson talk a whole lot about Islam, and I'm actually curious to know what he would have to say about it, because there's a really big there's quite a big difference, I would say, between Christianity and Islam, especially in the way that they're kind of laid out and presented. And that kind of stuff. So,
can you elaborate on that? Like, what do you mean by that?
The Bible, for example, has seemingly has gone through far more change, and it's also gone through like much more methodical change, I would say. Whereas, and it's also, that's partly a matter because it's older, but I mean, it's also been like translated back and forth and all this kind of stuff. I know that Islam kind of has the same or similar problems, but I wouldn't say they're, and actually maybe not even problems, but I wouldn't say it's to the same extent. So when you're talking about what is Islam actually based on? I think like the basis of them are even different, like Christianity versus Islam, because you kind of have to get into the psychology of Muhammad at a certain point, I would say, right? And that ends up being its own whole thing.
I think one of the things I find interesting about Jordan Peterson is his particular emphasis on like Christian stories, like the Bible, Jesus, the Son of God, as the archetype of sacrifice. But I've been told by others that he doesn't limit himself only to Christianity. He talks about Buddhism as well. He uses Buddha. Yeah. So maybe it's just what he knows, right? These are the examples.
He's talked about trying to get on the line with a Muslim scholar to discuss. So he's talking about trying to meet with someone.
Yeah, just to sort of jump in there, I think, Matthew, you are right in the sense that when you said that Christianity and Islam are different because of maybe the textual criticisms they've both undergone. So Christianity has gone through, I would say, a more rigorous Reformation textual criticism than Islam has. Because I was watching a talk between Tom Holland and this theologian in Britain called Francesca Stavrokopoulou, I think. I probably destroyed that name. But anyway, so they were saying that the Judeo-Christian method of interpretation, and what they mean by that is to question even Jesus himself, to question how the Bible came about, to even question the validity of the Bible, so on and so forth. Whereas so that's how they learn in the West, and that is true. Whereas if you go towards the Muslim world, if you go to like, for example, a Medina university or any university that are learning about Islam, they would teach you about Islam, but they would not necessarily say, well, is the Quran true in the first place? Or let's criticize the literary basis of the Quran. I don't think it would be a conversation or a lecture or a discussion that they would have, because maybe they haven't got that far, or maybe they wouldn't even want to go there for whatever reasons, or for many reasons. But so I suppose it's easier for a Jordan Peterson. It's easier for a Jordan Peterson to exist within that context, within the Christian Western world, rather than a Muslim one. Because believe it or not, there have been people within the Muslim world who come up with similar interpretations of the Quran, like the way Jordan Peterson does of the Bible. But either they are shunned, they're called kafir. Yeah. Some of them have had to leave the country. I believe Fazlur Rahman from Pakistan. He escaped Pakistan and went to America and taught in a university there. Many people like this. There was this other guy, Sayyid Hussein. I can't remember his name now, but he was from Egypt. Again, he was called kafir. He was shunned. So maybe there were Jordan Petersons. I'm sure there are many who existed in the Muslim world, but they were shunned or killed or just basically pushed out because that type of discourse was not even permitted. It was like, what are you saying? That's blasphemous. But what I would say, what we can learn from Jordan Peterson is this meta, or this sort of meta truth, or a truth that is greater than facts, bigger than facts. You know, so many, like Abdullah was saying before, this whole scientific argument. When those verses of embryology came to the Prophet and his companions, do you really think they were like, oh, so this is how a baby's made, and this, regardless of whether you think it's true or false, it's irrelevant. And how would that have been practical to these guys in a desert when they're living literally sleeping under the moon, and they've been revealed verses of embryology? How would that have been relevant? How would they have practiced that? I think it's a wasted verse in that sense. But I think, and when you then subject it to science, you realize, oh, it's not true. Yeah. So what's the real meaning of the verse? Yeah. You know, if you see it through the lens of science and modern science, those types of verses will always fall short, and there will be sort of bad verses or sort of bad science, whatever you want to call it. But if you step away from that and look at it as a myth, if you look at it, maybe Muhammad was trying to say that there is, or maybe he was just trying to allude to something which is going on. I don't know. There's so many different ways to look at it. Can I just tell? Sorry, did you want to say something?
I just said a story. It's
exactly a story. It's a story. I mean, who knows what he meant by that? But I suppose we'll never get there if we keep interpreting it as, well, in my biology book it says this and the Quran says this, so I guess the Quran is wrong. Well,
I do want to comment. You were mentioning people who they kind of do this sort of Jordan Peterson-esque work on the Quran the way that he does on the Bible, and they are kind of dismissed as blasphemers, or maybe not quite so much, but along those lines.
Heretics, basically, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's important to recognize too, I have seen Jordan Peterson call himself Christian when like really, really, really pushed. However, I've also heard him say on several occasions, that it's much easier to prove something or to talk about the likelihood of there not being a God, for example. In the same vein, when he's talking about Christianity, he's also like really getting away from some of the more traditional aspects that, like, what would you call, like, Orthodox people might have to say about the Bible. But basically, I would say that the way that he approaches the Bible, he's quite openly and outwardly talking about how it's not like quite suggesting that Jesus is real and these types of things. So I would say that if the defenders of Christianity had the same fervor as the defenders of Islam do today, that his ideas would be shunned equally. They would be looked at similarly.
Yeah. Sorry. Go on. Sorry.
I was just going to say, hold on, where is it? You reminded me of a story of this man. His name is Abu Zayd, and
that's the one. Sorry, that's the guy from Egypt.
Yes, and he said
yes, that's the one I was talking about.
A literary text, and the only way to understand and explain is to a literary approach, right? And what happened was in 1995, the Sharia court declared him an apostate and led to threats of death, and he had to leave Egypt several weeks later. Him and his wife flew to Madrid, and then eventually, he was really sad because he said he had to be around the clock security, and he couldn't go out, and then his marriage to his wife was nullified by the government. And he personally said, "I'm sure I'm a Muslim. My worst fear is people in Europe may consider me a threat and treat me as a critic of Islam. I'm not a new Salman Rushdie. I don't want to be welcomed and treated as such. I'm a researcher. I'm critical of old and modern Islamic thought. I treat the Quran as a text given by God to the Prophet Muhammad. Text is put into a human language. And so when I said so, I was accused of saying that Prophet Muhammad wrote the Quran. This is not a crisis of thought, but a crisis of conscience." So yeah, that's basically what happens when you, like you said, when you try to do.
That is the writer. Sorry, that's the person I was referring to, because I actually learned about him during my master's, and I couldn't remember his name. But he was the guy, and there was many others like him. I believe someone in Sudan called Taha. I can't remember his first name, but similar situation in Pakistan. There was Fazlur Rahman. These guys have to leave the country, or their life is threatened. And I don't know if you mentioned it, but because they considered Abu Zayd a kafir or a non-Muslim, they then said that the marriage between him and his wife were invalid and blah, blah, blah. So they go through all these different problems. Guys, I would like to talk about one example, and you can give your opinion on this. One example where I believe, Matthew, you know about the story of Abraham, and I suppose we all know the story about Abraham having to sacrifice his son Isaac. He's a very old man, and he's finally had a son after many, many years. And he's finally had a son, and then God says, well, apparently he has a dream. I don't say God says. He has a dream where he has to sacrifice his son. And he does this, or he's about to do this, and then God says, no, don't sacrifice son, sacrifice this goat instead, whatever it is. Now, the common or the mainstream narrative that we've heard from all three faiths, well, I've heard from all three faiths, I haven't heard another interpretation, is that this is a test of faith. This is a verse which is meant to test your faith in God, because if you do what God says, in the end, he will save you, because the same way he didn't have to sacrifice his son, Abraham, God will save you, and it's just a test of faith. Now, that seems to the skeptics or to the atheists or those people who are a bit agnostic, so that's just not a very good example. It's not a very good thing that God did. It's not very moral to say, to prove your love to me, kill your son. I mean, what kind of God is that? What kind of love is that? But Jordan Peterson says, and this is his understanding, so you can take it for what it is, but I thought this was a more plausible, a more reasonable understanding of that. And obviously he meant it, he understood that verse symbolically. And what that verse, he understands it as not hoarding your children and sacrificing them to the world. As in, he said, a young man came to him, a young man came to Jordan Peterson and said, I've got a degree, I've got a great job ahead of me, but my parents, they don't want me to leave the house. They want me to stay at home because they're going to get lonely and blah, blah, blah. So what should I do? I've got this great opportunity outside, but my parents want to keep me inside. And then Jordan Peterson said, it is your duty to go out in the world. It's your duty. If you've got a skill, if you've got something to contribute to society, in the long run, you'll be happier, they'll be happier. You need to go and, leave the nest. So when he reads that you need to sacrifice your son, he understands it as maybe, Abraham, hoarding his son because he's finally got a son after such a long time that he's going to keep him indoors. He's not going to let him out. He wants to keep him to himself. But to sacrifice your son means you have to sacrifice him to the world, i.e. he has a greater role, a greater purpose to fulfill. And that's not simply in the four walls of your house. Now, when I heard that, I thought, well, that's a more reasonable understanding. That's a more deeper, symbolic understanding of that sort of story, as opposed to God is testing your faith. I don't know. What do you guys think?
My problem is, like Sam Harris has this quote. He picks up. I can't remember where I heard this. It's in one of his books or something. He picks up a recipe book and he converts it into the divine, and he's like, this calls for a pinch of salt. The salt symbolizes the variety in life. And then you take the chicken and you baste it. He said the basting is how we come to terms with an inner reality, a deeper sense of. And then he keeps going on, and he makes this completely comical, like this completely dry recipe into some great piece of divine wisdom. So to me, being a skeptic, I have a challenge. I have a bit of a challenge with these claims. And my bigger issue is when people use these stories in order to kind of, use people to get the political means. When someone tells you, the challenge is when someone uses the story of Abraham, and there's so many different values you can pull out of that. And if someone wants to use that in a way of sacrificing the son, I can see like suicide bombers wanting to use that story to say, well, sacrifice your son for God, right? And so to me, it's like, this is my problem. My problem is I haven't studied Carl Jung. I haven't studied Freud. I don't understand this stuff like well enough to really like get the value behind it. For sure, it's filling a need in the community. My only question is, and I think that's what Sam Harris was getting to as well, like how do we say what's right and what's wrong there, right? And like, so I'm not totally sure. Is it taking an ancient story and applying it to our current lives and extracting meaning in the context of our modern world? And the other thing that Jordan Peterson is concerned about is this postmodernism, this lack of values, this lack of like people coming to the conclusion that there's no such thing as right and wrong, that anything goes. And this is also, interestingly, a concern for Sam Harris. Both of them have this concern. Sam Harris talks about how in the beginning of his book, The Moral Landscape, he's like, he was discussing with this lady on the Ethics Commission for the United States president. And he was asking her about the Taliban and how these people oppress women. And she was saying, you can't say there's anything wrong with that because it's a different culture. And then he made an even more extreme example, saying that, let's say, God said every third child had to have his eyes plucked out. Would you still say this is okay? And she was like, yeah, in the culture, it's okay. And he was like, this is what I'm concerned about, right? Like so that's Sam Harris's concern. That's also Jordan Peterson's concern. Jordan Peterson's response to that is that go back to these, Judeo-Christian values, I guess, or go back to these, and he's concerned about, so I think that's where he's coming from. And I think there's different ways to tackle that problem.
I can contextualize that more for you.
Awesome.
So Jordan Peterson's point when it comes to looking for wisdom, I would say, or truth, as he might call it. You have to be careful with your definition of truth for sure. But what he's really suggesting is that there's a reason why the Bible survived until today. That's basically what he's saying. And the reason why it survived to today, or the fact that it survived till today, is because, and he would probably point to like Darwinian ideas here. He would probably point to say that it's survived until today because it has had pragmatic use and usefulness. And so what he's doing is he's trying to relate pragmatic ideas from the text based on the kind of presupposition that it wouldn't have survived in the capacity that it has if there wasn't something useful in there.
Yeah, and I've heard this argument, or I've heard this before
regarding the Catholic Church. I don't remember who said it, but the whole idea of confessions and how it's survived. It's given people it might have been in this the religious brain audiobook I was listening to on Audible. It's one of the great courses, and he was saying that the idea of confession has helped people in a certain way, which is why, it actually survived, and it's continued to survive to this day. So there's definitely, religion brings a lot of value to people's lives in certain aspects, especially when it comes to like end of life, beginning of life, and many people, when they leave religion, they don't know what to do, right, for these customs. And, like, what do I do when someone dies? Like, the funeral, should I have like the traditional funeral, or should I, they're not sure, right? So I think that we need to build that community as well for people that no longer believe, because these things are it brings value. I mean, there's certain things in religion which do bring value, and I think we need to acknowledge that, right?
Confession is like a poor person's therapy, right? It's
exactly
right. It helps you to think about things.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
That's actually a really interesting point there. I always thought confession was a cop out, as in the sense like, I kill someone, bye, and then you just go, and then that's
just erase the board.
Yeah. I killed a whole tribe of infants, bye, and then that's it. Your sin is wiped clean. But I suppose you're right. A confession basically is no judgment. It is you maybe even just saying what you did. I think for a lot of people, just saying the truth or saying how they feel is a very big deal, because their parents might be, you can't say that, the society will judge them, and so on and so forth. But maybe if you go into a room and just say what you want to say, and someone will say, okay, you're forgiven. Like, you're right. I never thought about that way. I think you're right. It's a poor man. It's a very rudimentary form of therapy. Now we look at it. Are you saying that you can just say, you can kill someone, go in a room and say, I killed someone, and that's it, God's forgiven you?
It's not no judgment either, right? Because there is implied from the depth of it, the whole purpose is that there is judgment. The thing is that you're kind of your own judge. I guess it comes to that idea of ideals again, right? Like, because what's judging? Oh, I'm so sorry. Hey, I'm so sorry, guys.
Okay.
Hey. Sorry.
You want to continue?
I think he's stopped. Okay.
Sorry, I was just saying that dogs are haram, so you might need to remove
Yeah,
him.
I've had that discussion too many times. So sorry, where was I? The judge, but it's our own ideal that's the judge. And so it's not the priest or the person that you're talking to. You can speak freely and think about it, but you're supposed to judge yourself, basically, right? That's like, because otherwise there's no use in it. You'll just go do the same thing again. You'll go do the same bad thing.
Yeah, I agree. Just going back to the point I think both you were making regarding how, the Bible has survived this long, therefore there must be something within the Bible that is keeping it alive and keeping it relevant. I think that is true, but the other part of that is the Bible and the Torah, they have been subjected to the most criticism as well, which is why they probably have survived as well, because I suppose the more you criticize a book means you have more interpretive freedom with the book or with the ideas that contained within the book. And I suppose, and this is maybe going back even a step further, even before religion. I believe he was saying, like Jordan Peterson, that Carl Jung was saying that within these stories, there's something literally within our brain. So when we hear these stories, it resonates with us. The same, like anywhere you go in the world, you're going to hear a local version of Romeo and Juliet. Why? Why is it, even if you were to put a group of 100 people on the moon, they'll come up with some story that resembles Romeo and Juliet? Why is that? And this is where it comes back to the archetypes. Maybe they are, through millions of years of evolution or whatever it is, we have maybe created these patterns within our brain that help us understand relationships or understand the world. and these faiths are basically a poor articulation of that, a rough and very sort of sloppily joined up together attempt to articulate maybe what is subconsciously going through our brain. So when let's look at the Quran. The Quran is, forget about morals for the time being. Muhammad was, forget about the Prophet and wrong, right. I'm saying he was a man, if he existed, in the 6th century Arabia, which is a very harsh environment, very sort of tribal warring environment, fighting different tribes. If he wanted to survive and be successful, he probably did have to do the things he did. I can't imagine a sort of, I don't know, maybe I'm just guessing, but a Gandhi type of figure say, oh, no violence. We're not going to kill anyone. We're not going to take over anything. We're going to let everyone be who they want to be, and just let. I don't know if that a person like that would have survived. So go on.
And Jesus didn't.
And Jesus didn't. And that's a very good point. And I can't remember who was saying, I think it was Karen Armstrong. She was saying that Christianity is a religion. I'm going to completely say it wrong, but she said something like this: Christianity is a religion of failure, because your prophet died, he was crucified on a cross. There's a lot of grieving, there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, even in the way you understand. He died for our sins, and blah 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 blah. Whereas Islam is a religion of success. Not only the prophet did he made his own state, his close friends, the next 4 caliphs, they spread, and it was you could say it's a warring religion, but they were living in a land where if you didn't war, you didn't win. And he was very good at that system. So anyway, that's going on to a different point. But going back to the point of, are these stories somehow subconsciously ingrained within our understandings? The same way I said, you will, anywhere in the world you go, you will always find a Romeo and Juliet. Why? Over to you guys.
That's a good question. Just to say one thing about Muhammad and Jesus, I guess failure would depend on your definition of failure, because the way I saw it, although Karen Armstrong, I do respect her, and she definitely knows her stuff. Failure is what Jesus died, but it was his death that made the religion, right? He was supposed to be the Messiah. He was supposed to be the king of the Jews, right? But because he was killed, this put them into a state of shock, the followers of Jesus. And so they decided to create Christianity. So Christianity was actually created out of that failure of him to fulfill the prophecy of Messiah. Now, Prophet Muhammad, I would have to say, I do agree with you that he was a typical man of his time. Like, he was if you want to use the word, some people will say warlord, some people might say dictator, some people might not say dictator. He was some sort of military leader, whatever the word you want to use. Some of them have negative connotations, some of them don't. But he was a man of his time, so he did what he did. The problem is when you say that he was the best man that ever existed, right? And then there's some problems there when it comes to things like, slavery, when he did encourage, freeing the slaves, and he played his part in encouraging the good treatment of slaves. But then he also enjoyed slavery. He had slave women that he, slept with, and he took advantage of slavery. Not took advantage, but he benefited from it. He benefited from the system of slavery. So if someone wants to claim that Muhammad is the best man that ever existed in the whole entire human race, well, I would expect that best man to not be involved in the system of slavery, and specifically not sleeping with female slaves who literally have no personal, what's the word? They don't have any autonomy. Exactly. They don't have any autonomy. So you're using people that have no autonomy, and it's kullu halal, right? Allah made it halal. So that would be my problem with the, but that's an interesting question as to your universal stories. I don't have an answer for that. I would love to read more about this.
So this is just my guess, and you can take it for what it is, but I suppose there's something common within the human experience that doesn't matter which time you live in, which religion or which environment, which geography, certain patterns, certain relationship types, archetypes keep repeating themselves, which is why you'll get a Romeo and Juliet wherever you go. You'll always get the sort of hero fighting against them. It's like the Rocky Balboa. You'll always get that guy who's, the odds are against him. He's a nobody, but he's got a dream and he keeps working hard. And people doubt him, say, "Oh man, you're crazy. You want to fight this champion?" And then he fights the champion, and then he wins. Why is that story so cool? It's such a cheesy film, but every time you watch it, like, "Oh man, you really feel on Rocky's side." Why? Because maybe there's a bit of Rocky in all of us. Maybe there's a bit of Romeo in all of us. So maybe there is a bit of Muhammad and Jesus and Moses and so on and so forth in all of us as well. Maybe if you start interpreting these texts literally, then you say, well, actually, I don't really, Muhammad doesn't really resonate with me because I won't have slaves. But that's if you look at it literally, or maybe if you try and, like Abdullah was saying, if you say he's the perfect man, and then you say, well, do I want slaves now, or do I need slaves now? You say no. But if you look at him for his time and say, for him to succeed in his society, he has to do X, Y, and Z. So, okay, maybe in my society, I don't need to have slaves, but that might mean something else. I don't know. That might mean.
And
sorry, go on.
I want to interrupt you. That is one of the, that's a really good point, that people are not willing to, I hate this. It really bothers me that people will judge him for today's time period, right? And I mean, in a sense, it's his own fault because he is put as the ideal role model. But if you take that aside and you're just looking at him just as a man, he was a typical man of his time, and people sometimes, they don't want to acknowledge that. They want to make him into some, like, the worst monster that ever existed. But he was just doing what everybody else at the time did. So I think that's a good point to make too, that sometimes atheists with the bashing sticks, they go a little bit over the top there when they want to, like, call him a pedophile. I personally do not agree with this. I do not think he was a pedophile, because he had only one wife that was, very young, and honestly, at the time, there's no such thing as pedophile. There's no such concept of that at that time, right? He was just doing what everybody else did.
Sorry, Matt, do you want to say something? Because I've got a very interesting take on the whole pedophile stuff. I don't want to go too off track, but I think this is a very important way of looking at the whole story, which will contextualize a lot of the different stuff going on. That didn't make a lot of sense. But, is it something you want to add? Go for it.
I really just wanted to say that I agree with Abdullah about there's the right way to approach religion and religious people, and I mean, I agree in part. Like, it depends on the context and how we're comparing. I mean, if you take Muhammad's morals and you bring them to today, that's a very different story than when you look at it in context. And I think both of those are important things to think about and explore, especially when you make claims about it being somehow universal or always, like, timeless, right? If it's timeless, then we should be judging it by today's standards. But at the same time, it's useless to be inflammatory, because if you are someone who doesn't believe in God and doesn't believe in Islam or Muhammad, and your concern is that it's bad for humanity to believe in those things, then the last thing you want to do is alienate who should be your core audience, which would be believers. And if you take something that matters a lot to them and you are too abrupt and upfront about it being culturally upsetting or disgusting or morally reprehensible, and especially when you just use inflammatory language, like pedophile is a really inflammatory thing to say. Yeah. It just is. Like, it's like when you call someone a Nazi. When you call someone a Nazi, that automatically has a pile of stuff surrounding it, whether or not it has any truth whatsoever. Just that you use the word.
It just ends the conversation there, because now it's not about... Yeah, I mean, and this is about, okay, so this is a little sort of interpretation of this whole 6-year-old stuff. Tom Holland, who I believe he was giving a lecture on his book. I think something, The Shadow of the Sword, or I haven't actually read it. I should actually be reading it, but anyway. He said that this whole 9-year-old stuff is complete nonsense, and he's got no dog in the fight because he's not a Muslim. He's of a Christian background. So why would he go out of his way to try and justify that that Aisha was not 9 years old? Now he said this is something very interesting, and I think this actually might be true. And let me just start from the beginning. Shias and Sunnis, they have a very different take on Aisha. So to summarize them, I don't want to go through the whole story, but Shias don't have the best view of Aisha. They don't have the best estimation of Aisha for various reasons. They said that she cheated on the Prophet, or that she was alleged to have cheated on the Prophet, and the Prophet was really upset, and he didn't talk to her for like a month, or blah blah blah. And this was like a really bad time in his life, and people doubted her. But anyway, they got back together, and it's fine. So it's just Shias, and obviously she also. Sorry, Abdullah, do you want to be moderator? Sorry, is that what you said?
Yeah, just so I can post a link. But go ahead, continue. So you can do it after.
Okay, so I'm not sure how you do that. I've never done that before. But I'll do that after this then. Okay, cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
Basically,
the point about Aisha. See Aisha very differently. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so the Shias don't have the best opinion of Aisha. Let's put it that way. And a lot of them actually go a bit too far and insult her and call her all sorts of stuff. But even mainstream Shiism doesn't have a high opinion of Aisha. Okay, Sunnis on the other hand do. They protect her, they love her. She says she was amazing, she was great, great. Sahih Bukhari or Bukhari, who is one of the major hadith collectors in the Sunni world, was a Sunni. Okay, great. So when he is speaking now, this is a question. One point I wanted to ask you before, but I'll ask it now, and I'll get back to Aisha. Do you sincerely think, when Muhammad was the prophet, or when he saw himself as a prophet, do you think his religion? Do you think he thought his religion would last 1400 years? I don't know. Do you think when Bukhari collected all these hadiths, he thought that they were going to last 14 or 1200 years? I don't know. I highly doubt he thought it would last that long. So you have to remember, Bukhari was speaking to his audience, which basically meant to the Arabs around him in his time, who had the common parlance, who understood everything in the same culture. Great. So when it is alleged that Bukhari purposely lowered the age of Aisha because the Shia accused her of being unfaithful to the Prophet, Sunnis don't believe that she was. So when let's say, for example, there's a girl who literally, the moment she has puberty, she gets married to a man, and that man happens to be the best man of all creation, and her personality, her development is groomed by this perfect man. How on earth will this young girl turn out to be someone who would cheat on him, or would do bad things, or would commit sin, so on and so forth? So he purposely lowered it, knowing to his audience, they knew exactly what he was saying, which was not pedophilia, not 9. What he was saying was Aisha did not do the bad things that the Shias accuse of her, because basically her whole development was molded by the Prophet, who was the most perfect man on the planet, which is why he purposely, from 16 to 19, you got engaged at 16, married at 19. They said, no, she got engaged at 6 and married at 9. And then you retrogressively or retroactively then create all the other hadiths just to justify that first hadith. But the actual thing was, and this is why Shias don't believe that Aisha was 9. And it's not because of pedophilia accusations. It's because they said, well, she wasn't 9 because she fought in a war, and in that war, to participate in a war, you have to be of a certain age. I mean, you can't be in a war if you're that young. So she, mathematically, or whatever you want to call it, historically, was not 9 years old. That is why it is so important to understand. When I heard that, I was like, well, that makes bloody sense. Sunnis are trying to decrease her age because they want her to look more pure. So as if she didn't have a boyfriend before she met the Prophet. Shias, on the other hand, don't have that same intention or ulterior motive. So they're like, no, she wasn't 9. She was 19 because she participated in war. And yeah, she isn't that great either, because for whatever reasons. So understanding religion like that makes a lot more sense to me. So that's why the hadiths need to be, like I said, do you seriously think Muhammad thought people across the world would be converting to his religion in 2018. I don't know. I can't say with confidence he thought that would happen. I can't say with confidence when Bukhari wrote those books or collect those books, he thought people would be reading his stuff, going to Google, typing Bukhari, Aisha 9 years old. Oh my God, pedophilia. Do you seriously think that these people thought that would happen? I don't think so.
I don't think they could conceive of what it would mean. Like, I think probably the idea of this existing in 500 years, they wouldn't have any concept of how to reformulate what they were saying anyway, because they only knew what they knew at the time.
Yeah, I personally think that Muhammad didn't even possibly care what happened after he died. Because if you look at it, he never, like, just think about it. Like, there's some really, like, these are actually shocking claims. One, he never compiled the Quran into a book during his life. That's one. Two, he never left any plan for succession when he died, which caused a huge problem in the community. You know, there was a Ridda wars, people apostated like crazy. When he died, there was a big battle. There was a big controversy about while Ali was trying to bury him, Abu Bakr and Uthman and Omar were planning who was going to be the next leader, and some of them went and they took bay'ah. They said, "I'm the leader," and it was a huge mess when he died because it wasn't planned well, and it wasn't left in a situation. It wasn't left in a good state, right? The community was in a crisis, and so I personally don't know if he really thought what would happen after he died. Even as now, Waleed, you brought up a very good point, which is the challenge between literalism and reformism, or whatever you want to call it. The problem with this approach of like Aisha wasn't really 9 because she wanted to be more pure, and the guy comes up with a theory about Bukhari wanted her to be more pure, but at that time it wouldn't have even been an issue if she was 12 years old and she was betrothed to another man. So I don't see how this logic, to me the logic doesn't make sense, because even if she first of all, she wasn't allowed to get married when she died, because Muhammad said that in the Quran that nobody's allowed to marry the wives of the prophets because they're your mothers. So, in my opinion, he had some intense jealousy and possessiveness over his women. He didn't want anyone to even touch them, even after he died. And to me, that's not a sign of love, because that's a sign of ownership. Like, you don't touch my toys, you don't touch my stuff, ever. That's not love, right? Like, for me, I would want my spouse, I would tell her in my life, if I die, I want you to get married, I want you to be happy, I want you to be fulfilled, if you want to. If you don't want to, it's up to you. But I'm not going to be like, no, like, you stay away from men after I die. I don't consider that like a very loving thing to do. But if you talk to someone like Yasir Qadhi, who studied Islam in the West and also in Medina for many years, and so he has like a kind of Western perspective at Yale, and he also has the kind of like dogmatic Salafi perspective as well. He claims that these arguments for Aisha being, she wasn't really this and she wasn't really that. Like, the problem is when you do this, you actually undermine the entire Hadith corpus. If you're going to say that Bukhari lied to make her younger than she is, well, what else did he lie about? And I'm okay with that perspective. Like, if someone wants to take a historically agnostic perspective about Muhammad, I mean, I wouldn't go so far to say, did he really exist? But if someone wants to say, I don't know, was she really 9? I don't know if this hadith is true. That's fine. But then just realize you've undermined the entire hadith science. The entire science of hadith is destroyed because the most authentic book that you have, Sahih Bukhari, it's under question now. And of course, Shias love to pick apart Bukhari, right, and Muslim, and they don't accept it, right? So they have their own arguments against it. But even from a just logical perspective of how many years between the time of Muhammad's death and the compilation of Bukhari, and you have people that said, I said, like, just imagine you're Bukhari and I'm some guy, and I'm like, yeah, I heard from my father, who heard from his father, who heard from Matthew's father, that the companion of the Prophet said, that his wife said that Muhammad said that Aisha was playing with her dolls, and we took her from her house, and she was playing with her dolls, and then her mom came and said, Aisha, you have to go to the house of the Prophet. Like, who knows? Like, what the hell is true in that story anymore? Like, if you
fake news, everybody, fake news.
if you want to be honest, we don't really know a lot. We don't really know what happened, right? And that's another argument against the truth of Islam, that like, there's no way to know half of this stuff if it's true or not, right?
Yeah, I think you've just hit the nail on the head when you said, well, when you say, when you admit or ask or say, well, this whole Aisha thing doesn't make a lot of sense, then you have to admit that the other hadiths also may be falling into that same trap of, well, did Bukhari exaggerate this to make a point, or did someone else exaggerate this hadith to make another point? And that opens up a whole can of worms, which is probably why the Sunnis have tried. Mainstream Sunnism has said, no, she was 9, because once you say, well, once you open that Pandora's box, then everything else is up for grabs as well. Then you can say, well, okay, well, what about that hadith? And the thing is, the only reason why maybe some Sunnis, have an issue with Aisha being 9 is because in this modern day and age, pedophilia is a bad thing. But what about the other hadiths that maybe aren't as controversial, but we accept them to be true? Well, maybe they underwent the same exaggerative process that Bukhari did with the whole Aisha stuff. So once you open that can of worms, and once you pull that string, you realize actually it's much longer than I thought it was, which is why hadiths, why many reasonable Muslims actually say, you know what, let's reject hadiths altogether. I don't want to play by those rules. Let's stick to the Quran, because in the hadiths you'll find all sorts of stuff, all sorts of just fairy tales. I mean, forget it. I know we say the Quran is not real, but it's genuine. I mean, this whole story about the Prophet going on a horse to heaven, that's in the hadiths. That's not in the Quran. And when I was sorry,
go ahead. You go ahead.
So just to finish on that point, was when I was more religious, and I was someone who always tried to find the metaphorical meaning of the Quran, because I thought, I believe in science, I believe in evolution, so a prophet going on a horse with wings doesn't make sense to me. But when I found out it was in the hadith, okay, well then you just if it's hadith, I'm just going to dismiss it outright. I'm not even going to look for an explanation. And there are many other miracles, like, for example, the Prophet, when he touched a tree, or when he was leaning on a tree giving a speech, and when he took his hand off the tree started crying because, the Prophet's amazing and the tree loved the touch. All these sort of stories, and stones turning towards the Prophet when he walked. And this is clear, sort of exact. This for even the, even to the untrained eye, surely they would be able to see the exaggeration and the blandishments in these stories. And the sort of, they're trying to praise the Prophet, so they're trying to say that everything around him was reacting and loving him and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
My issue is that if somebody, like the preservation of the Quran goes by the same process as the preservation of Hadith. The only difference between the Quran and the Hadith is there was more people that memorized the Quran. And so if somebody is going to challenge the Hadith and they want to, well, the other thing is when you reject, if I don't see rejecting hadith as a very common thing, because when someone rejects all the hadith, you're not left with much in Islam. You're left with, basically Quranism, or whatever you want to call it, which is very watered down. There's no conception on how to do anything, on how to, let's say, get married, how to pray Jummah prayer. The Quran says, on Friday, leave off your business and pray, How do you do that prayer? What is Friday prayer? How do you even do the prayer? Like, do you do this, or you don't do this, or you sit, or you bow? There's no conception. Like, it's very vague in the Quran, right? So if you get rid of hadith, you're not left with a lot in Islam. What I was going to say as well was, I was going to say that the other issue is that with Reformism is that things in the Quran are just as illogical as things in the hadith, right? For example, in the Quran it says, Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa, right? So it's saying in the Quran that, glory be to God who took his servant Muhammad from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa. So it may not say that he was on a donkey or a flying horse, a burak, basically a burak, which is an animal that's bigger than a horse, smaller than a horse, but bigger than a donkey. It doesn't say that, but it does say in one night he took him from here to here. Now, if you get into the metaphorical meaning, and some people might say that, okay, it wasn't a physical journey, or maybe it was a physical journey, but again, it goes back to the same thing you're talking about, looking at the deeper meaning. And maybe that's why Sufis are still able to hold on to the religion even when Salafis are not, because Salafis are taking it at face value, which is the way I used to take it as well. where Sufis are able to kind of say, well, maybe it doesn't mean that, maybe it doesn't mean that, and maybe it means spiritual, metaphysical, metaphorical, and this is something that in general is a thing with religion in general. You have the people who are more honest and say things like Quran allows slavery, and then you don't like what they're saying. Or they might say that, Islam says you have to kill apostates, right? Or you can kill apostates in an Islamic state. And then on the other hand, you have the other extreme of people that they want to reform Islam, like Majid Nawaz. They want to say, well, Islam doesn't allow killing apostates because it's supposed to be for treason. Okay, I don't buy that argument, but they're saying that. But that's a good thing. I want that to be true. I want them not to kill apostates. So what do you do? Like, it's a challenge for someone like me because you don't know what to, to me, the position that makes more sense is the one that sticks to the text. But that's also the terrible position. Same thing with Christian fundamentalism, right?
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's like on one hand, you think that it could be more useful to point out the severity of the problem. But on the other hand, a lot of people are either going to take that they've learned what's literally written in more depth, and they're going to take that and apply it in their lives, which is a bad outcome. Or they're just going to close off and not listen to you now because you're talking about how morally reprehensible something is. And then the other aspect of it is like the people who I think are the most important reformers in Islam are, in my opinion, they're misrepresenting the true, like, most obvious meaning of a lot of the text. But at the same time, that's totally useful. Like that, if they. And I feel that way about Christianity, right? That's a lot of what happened in Christianity. Like when you go to church, I mean, I grew up Christian. When you go to church, it's no one's talking about all of these terrible things that are in the Bible. Like you basically just ignore the Bible for the most part. They follow a curriculum. There's really a 3-year curriculum, and it ignores most of depth about the things that seem most shocking. Like it kind of just pretends they don't exist. And so if like we can get more people in Islam to fall under that as well, that's maybe not a bad thing. But it might mean there's more longevity, which means the ideas will stick around longer.
So Matthew, can I ask a question? When you listen to Jordan Peterson talk about Christianity and the Bible and his metaphorical, archetypal, mythological kind of way, do you think he's misrepresenting the Bible, or do you think that's the real meaning of the Bible?
Yeah, that's really difficult to say because the thing is that Jordan Peterson's approach, again, kind of presupposes that the Bible is a collection of stories. And that's not what a fundamentalist Christian believes. So I think that it's in that context, I don't think it's the same idea. I guess you could say that in that way he's reforming.
So I mean. You might not know the answer to this. So if we had a fundamentalist Christian in the room and we had Jordan Peterson, would the fundamentalist say to Jordan Peterson, you are chatting so much crap. Why are you coming up with these massive theories and Lion King and Carl Jung? Just be straight, okay? What would he say to, of course, you're not a fundamentalist Christian, but what do you think he was saying?
I think to some extent, yeah. Like I think it does depend on the case because the way that I like to think of it is the Christians have been beaten down so consistently for so long now that even the most fundamentalist ones often will still say, "Oh yeah, that's a metaphor." Really? In some cases. Yeah, no, I really do think so. Like
I actually remember. Yeah, sorry. I actually remember Bill O'Reilly when I can't remember. I think it was Bill Maher or some other atheist came on the show, or Sam Harris, and said, "Oh, what do you think about this?" "Oh, well, that's just a metaphor." Like even him, Bill O'Reilly, would say, "Oh, it's just a metaphor," and he sort of used that as as his get out clause because he
Yeah.
knew it doesn't make sense. So it's just going to say, oh, it's a metaphor. So.
But what about like Ken Ham and these people that they think the Earth is 10,000 to 11,000, whatever, 12,000 years old? And
Yeah.
like they're not they're not taking archetypes and mythos, and they're just looking at it and saying, yup, I can calculate the number of years. It's 10,000. Like,
I have definitely heard Ken Ham say at least once that, oh, well, that's metaphorical or something like that. I've definitely not that in particular. He does literally believe that the Earth is like 10,000 years old, but even him, I've definitely heard him pick and choose a little bit. I think that it's almost unavoidable because there are just certain things in the Bible, like we've all seen the meme, I'm sure, where it lists like the mythological creatures that are in the Bible, and it's like, guess which one of these is not in the Bible? And there's dinosaurs on the list, and it's like the one thing that's not in the Bible, right? So like someone like Ken Ham has to separate himself from some of those things, because otherwise no one outside of his world takes him seriously at all. But like you can kind of build some semblance of a case based on what's in the Bible, that there is some literal idea that the Earth is only 10,000 years old or something. But like when you can kind of dance around it, but when it's just like, yeah, there you go. So like, but you can't really dance around like what, the seven-headed beast. Like, oh yeah, there were really seven-headed beasts. Yeah, like,
of course. Is there a way of showing? Sorry, Abdullah, how do I make you moderator so you can?
Yeah, no, the moderator is just in the chat. It's not for this part. You can click on my screen, and I think when I'm talking, it's going to show it anyways. Yeah, that's just what Matthew was talking about. And some people have actually responded to some of these things. They've said, like, for example, which one was it? One of them actually means like rhino or something, like maybe behemoth.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, unicorn. Unicorn is actually rhino. So there you go.
That is absolutely amazing. I haven't seen that before. I'll definitely check that out. Okay, guys. So going back to the original question, what can Muslims learn from Abdullah Samir? What can? Wow, that's amazing.
Everything.
That's amazing.
Everything.
What can, let me change the whole title of this street. What can Muslims learn from Shaykh al-Islam Abdullah Samir? Sheikh, please, you have the pulpit. You're more than welcome to give your speech now. You please teach the masses.
In alhamdulillah, nahmadu.
Oh my god. Okay, guys. I just want to finish up on the Islam stuff. I will move on to some other stuff. Unless you got some more points, I'm more than happy to move.
Let's go on to the next topic. Yep.
So, are you a man or are you a woman, or are you something in between? Abdullah Samir will now answer this question with his beard. Would you like to tell us your gender, please?
My gender is male.
Wow, I'm glad to hear that. Matthew, is gender real? I'm gone by.
No, actually, I think I have a lot to say on this topic. I mean, this is getting into gender, and you asked earlier, your first question I didn't quite get a chance to answer was where was I introduced to Jordan Peterson, and it was definitely surrounding Bill C-16 and hearing him discuss that issue. And I think that it's really important to say that what we're talking about when we talk about trans people and transgenderism and all this kind of stuff, this is a really important topic, and it's something that we should take some care with. When it came to Jordan Peterson and what he was talking about, I felt like I heard a completely different thing coming from him than what I heard people, saying he was saying. He was very strawmanned when talking about C-16. At the same time, I think that he had it was a context. He was in a context that I don't think people understand. he really kind of explains where he was coming from, and we get a lot of chances to kind of hear that from different in different interviews and things like that. He really talks about where he was coming from, and I wouldn't so much say that he's changed his mind, but he speaks about it differently now than he did before. And I would say he's more open with what he thinks about it, and he's less combative about it, because back when he was brought into that whole thing, it was under a lot of political pressure where his alarm bells went off, because he studied fascism and he studied these types of these ideas of compelled speech and the direction that can take a society and stuff like that. At the same time, I think it's really important to point out that it seems completely, incredibly unlikely, though it seems that he's right on a technicality, on a very fine detail technicality, that Bill C-16 could be somehow used to justify compelled speech. But at the same time, it seems like such a technicality that the likelihood that it could ever happen is very, very small. Like, I really don't expect it to ever to come to that. I also trust in our court systems and stuff that they would be moderating in that way. So like on that front, I think that it's maybe not necessarily a good thing that he started that debate about what that bill would be. And I think that on the other hand, it brought him a lot of attention. And I think that attention has been a very good thing, because I honestly don't think that Jordan Peterson is transphobic. And I think that anytime you hear him say something that is the least bit defensive or combative when it comes to using pronouns and these types of things, that is coming from a very particular context where he felt like he was being told that he would have to just obey this list of new names to call people and things like that. And you can see in interviews, he always says that he's never actually put up a fight with a transgender person to misgender them. He's said very clearly that he is very willing to use the pronoun that someone prefers. And what it amounts to me, because he does go into detail about this, and again, it can seem combative, but he's being very specific. And like people ask him, why wouldn't you do it, or something like that, or would you do it? There's like that famous clip where it's the protesters outside of one of his events, and they say, would you call me by my pronoun or whatever like that, or would you call someone by their pronoun? And he basically said it depends on the context. And it's like, well, what if I asked you to do it? And he said, well, it depends how you asked me. And I've heard a lot of people look at that and be like, oh, that's transphobic, that's really transphobic. It's not, though, because what someone calls you is not like an entitlement. Like, it is an incredibly common bullying tactic, for example, to misgender people. It is not, and it's a totally different thing when you're a transgender person. It's very different. And, that's an important thing to consider. The ideas of the high suicide rates among transgender people and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's a really touchy, important thing to be considerate about. But at the same time, when I was out on the playground, nobody owed me to gender me appropriately. It's not something that I could expect. And it's very common in society to call a man a woman or a woman a man in many different ways in order to, show disrespect. And so it's really, you gender someone appropriately when you have respect for them. And it's not just this like rule that exists that like someone can call the police on you because you're not gendering someone the way they want to be.
Sure. So just on that point, so that's an interesting point you made there. So it's up to, you're almost saying like you have to earn the respect to be, or the right, whatever, to be called a man or a woman, or almost. But do we need the law to come in and say, call this person a he or a she or a whatever?
I think so. I think so, honestly. And the reason why is because there are a lot of caveats to what I just said. For example, and I think Jordan Peterson would tend to agree for the most part. I think that if C16 were, and I don't know for sure, and I could be wrong about this, but I think if C16 were changed to be worded more appropriately, then you could really get something that he would sign off on. And what I would say is the difference is out in the world, you don't have to automatically grant me any respect. However, I mean, like, you can't assault me or something, but you don't have to talk to me the way I want you to. However, when it comes to the workplace and things like that, if you were in the workplace and someone was constantly misgendering you and you're not a trans person, that would still be quite bothersome, right? Like, if you were going into your office and there was some guy at the office that just kept referring to you as a woman constantly, it would be very bothersome. And so to have things in place to prevent this type of stuff, especially for the people who are targeted and who have high risks of suicide and things like that, and the high risk of suicide is in part because of the misgendering and because of the discomfort that comes with that and stuff like that. So yeah, I think because of those reasons, it is necessary to have some sense of protection.
So could I ask a question? So for example, let's go with the example you said. Let's say, for example, you go into work and someone keeps calling you a she or a her or whatever it is, and you're obviously a man. That wouldn't be very nice. You know, if it's a prolonged quote unquote joke, even then it wouldn't be nice. Even, okay, mate, just shut up now, just, you know, whatever. But that would, I'm guessing, would be dealt internally. You just have like a meeting with your line manager or boss, whatever. You would have some sort of disciplinary, or this is whole process, you know, HR, whatever, that they would go through. But you wouldn't, but you can do that without the government getting involved or having a say in that matter. I mean, even if you were to have another issue, you know, the government doesn't need to get involved in every single issue that happens in the office. But the real question is, and this is what maybe is sort of the tip of the iceberg, this whole transgender issue, is so these postmodernists, Marxists, whatever you want to call them, do they recognize that there are predominantly two genders and not gender fluid, as if like some sort of scale, you know, you can go up and down on the gender scale, but I'm born with, you know, testicles, so I'm a man. You know, it's not like I'm gonna, you know what, I'm gonna deny my own biology and identify as a woman. Now, there are people who identify as a woman if they're born into a man's body, but those are a tiny, tiny minority. But as a general rule, would you not agree that there is such thing as a gender, and most people are born either man or woman?
So let me jump in for a second just to give Matt a break. So first thing I'll start off with is when it comes to workplace discrimination laws, it makes sense that the government, you know, establishes certain laws for sexual harassment, for discrimination, for any sort of, you know, racism. Like, you are not allowed to say, I'm not going to hire you because you're brown, or, you know, I don't like the look of you, or, you know, I'm going to hire this lady because she has a nice ass or something. Like, there's a reason why we have these laws, because each company may not implement this in their own, you know, HR policies. And so you always need to be able to fall back and go back and say, well, I was abused, or I was discriminated, or I was sexually harassed, you know, he pinched my ass or whatever, right? And it's not enough to just have it at the level of the company, because what if it's your boss? What if your boss is the one that's slapping your ass when you walk in the door every day, right?
And the first thing he'll do is fire you, right? If you don't play along.
Yeah. So I do think there is some benefit in having, like laws for that. Now, as for, again, this gender thing is a huge topic. Okay, gender is your identity. You can say your identity, and your there's a biological sex, and then there's gender, right? So there's many cultures in the world, actually, even Muhammad's time, that they had, people that were considered, I forget the term they use now, non-gendered, or, people that were like kind of in the middle. And I do think that there is a biological basis for the fact that, I mean, there's a debate, I think, even in the trans community as to whether there should be just two genders, male and female, or despite the fact that, say, I might be born biologically male, but I want to represent myself as a woman, right? I might want to, be a woman to the world. That's one topic. And the other topic is whether there's people that are in the middle of, like, male and female, whether there should be now Jordan Peterson would argue against this. He would say, no, there's male and female. As far as I can represent his opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, he's okay with saying there's male and female, and you can call yourself male or female, and whatever you ask me to call you, like if you represent yourself as a woman, then I'll call you a woman. But I think he would be against the idea of, like, there being like a third gender or gender neutral.
So
go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to him a lot on this topic because it's very important to me that he not say terrible things on this topic. I think, like, it's real, like, and if he did, I would be very critical of it. And so I'm listening to him because, like I said, he had this combative attitude and all this kind of stuff. And I think that I have a pretty good handle on what really makes sense in this regard. And I think it's important to support trans people. So what Jordan Peterson would say is that he's happy to conform and use him or her pronoun based on what someone's preference may be. And once again, earlier in this whole thing, since he's become quite popular, he made a especially strong stand against the use of a gender neutral term. So he made a stand with kind of a combative defensive attitude with the term they and them. However, this has changed. And once again, I think that it's quite clearly the context, because when he was speaking about using they and them, once again, it was about having to say it because you're being told to do it, rather than society in the social contract deciding that this is kind of a part of regular language now, and working it out amongst reasonable people in order to avoid offending people. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about just a minute earlier too, where he would say very much that it is really important that you are sociable and socialized and can interact with people. So like so he would say, like, compulsion is one thing, being compelled to say it is one thing, but if you come to my class and you're one of my students and you're totally nice and respectful and we have to get along, then if you really prefer that I call you a certain way, it's in my best interest not to just be like, I'm not going to do that, like for no reason. Especially when it's simple and, you can make a pretty solid case for the idea of like non-conforming to gender and being gender neutral. So more recently, he's very clearly stated that he sees them and they as the most likely reasonable way to express a gender identity that doesn't match him or her. So
good to know. And I think there is a point to be made that I know some people will disagree with this, but I personally know someone that's trans, transsexual and was born as a man and, you know, considers himself to be a woman. And honestly, it doesn't, what does it hurt me to call him a she, you know, if he wants to be a woman, I have no problem with that. It doesn't hurt me in any way. I mean, and the fact, whether it's just a small minority or whether it's a large minority, doesn't change how we should treat people. So even if it's 0.1% of the population that is like this, just like, I mean, the same argument is used against gays and lesbians. Why should we support gays and lesbians? They're only 2% of the population. But it doesn't matter, right? I mean, we do things for right and wrong, not necessarily because, you know, people are majority or not majority. I mean, we try to take everyone's needs into account, right? And
well, why should we support skydivers, right? Why should we have a medical helicopter go out to save someone who is really injured because they chose to jump out of a plane? Well, it's because society, one of the major tenets of Western society is to allow people to do what makes them happy and be who they are, right?
Now, I don't know if you want to jump into this, but I do have some other thoughts on this, which is I do feel like the way society has gone now, and Waleed, feel free to jump in. You're looking concerned over there. I feel like the way society...
I'm sorry, go. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. Sorry, go for it.
Okay. So the way society has gone now, I do feel that, you know, we have better rights for women. We have better women's rights. We have better human rights. We have better children's rights. Violence has decreased. You know, acceptability. You know, not even maybe 100 years ago, rape was considered not a crime in a marriage. So a man could rape his wife because he basically owned his wife.
Like 30 years ago, like 40 years ago or something. Yeah.
So like, you know, things have changed a lot, right? And in some sense, I do feel like the reason why people like Jordan Peterson are becoming popular is I feel like the pendulum has almost swung too far now. In the sense of, you know, people are becoming tolerant of intolerance. People are basically not accepting, people are accepting intolerance. People are, like, I'll give you another example. In schools today, boys are not allowed to be boys. Like, you know, dodgeball is forbidden. You know, we used to have a game when I was a kid called Donkey or Ass, where you used to throw the ball and try to hit someone with it. And, you know, you'd be standing against a wall and there'd be a guy trying to hit you with the ball. You know, things like playing with rough and tumble play and things like that are not even acceptable in schools anymore. And so we've become, you know, we stopped allowing our boys to be boys, right? To kind of, you know, be rough and to kind of be physical, and they need that, right? And I feel that that's part of, you know, bonding for children with the fathers, and I think Jordan Peterson is getting to that as well. He talks about, you know, how there's certain things that, you know, getting to the topic of, you know, the pay inequality that was in that big video that was viewed 6 million times that you made a parody of.
Multivariated. That's the if you take anything away from that case, multivariated analysis.
What a great interview, though, and your parody video was fantastic. It was hilarious.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I do feel like because we've swung so far now, we have people kind of going to extremes. And I do feel like if it swings back a little bit, you know, maybe it'd be a good thing. I don't know if we should be returning to traditional gender roles. Like, one thing Jordan Peterson talks about a lot is the breakdown of the nuclear family. He thinks that marriage, you know, nuclear family, mom and dad with kids, is the best thing for society. And if society changes too much, it's going to break down and there's going to be destruction. And I don't know if that's true, but I mean, that's what he's arguing for. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case.
Well, I think you made a couple of very interesting points there. So going back to one of your earlier points about the boys playing dodgeball or learning on the learning the hard way or the rough way on the playground, you know, taking bumps and kicks and bruises, whatever, and that's just the way you learn because, you know, dominance hierarchy, whatever, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I think I would. That's the way I grew up, and it's not perfect, but it's an introduction to the real world. This is I might be overreaching here, but whatever. It's all about archetypes. This whole podcast or stream, whatever you want to call it. But I can't remember what it was. I think it was Snow White or some Disney princess, whatever. And he said that, I think it was Snow White. I can't remember. One princess, I can't remember. But anyway, so when she was born, her dad invited the whole village to come and see the new baby princess, or she wasn't a princess back then, but to come and see the new baby that was born. And she was introduced to all the people in the village and in the family. But the only person that was not invited was the evil queen. I can't remember which
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty. That's the one. Sleeping Beauty. So the only person that was not invited was the evil queen. And when that princess grew up, the first time she saw the evil queen, I believe she was like stunned, or she couldn't, like, what the hell was going on. And that's because he's saying that if you don't introduce your kids to even the bad people early, or the harsh realities early on, when they see it when they grow up, they maybe don't know how to handle it. They're like, what is this? I don't understand. And he said the same thing about Buddha, that his father created this whole sort of walled city, palace, whatever, where everything was good, everything was pretty, there was no poverty, no nothing. And when Buddha grew up, when he left the walls of the city, and he saw a poor person and he saw a hungry person, he was like, "What, shocked, horror, what's going on?" So, and that's how you get snowflake culture. Wow, that's a big jump. To go from Snow White, or to go from Sleeping Beauty, Buddha, to snowflakes. That's how that is archetype 101. There's no there's no common thing in that. But
what's really funny about the term snowflake?
I don't know what I'm drinking. I don't know what's in here, but it's some archetypal juice. Go on, sorry.
What's funny about that term snowflake is that it was coined mostly by like, I would maybe not right-wing extremists, but like pretty hardcore right-leaning people. But the people, really the very people in the culture that kind of coined that phrase snowflake, they also kind of live by it, because the identity politics really do exist on both sides, for sure. And just the things that you're being a snowflake about are just different. So the right-wing people look at the left-wing people and they're like, "That upsets you, you're such a snowflake." And then the left-wing people look at the right-wing people and they're like, "You're fucking..." Excuse me. You're making this like...
You are more than welcome to swear, please.
Oh, am I? Okay. Well, you're fucking like basically talking about how you can't... How you're so upset that people don't say Merry Christmas to you. They say Happy Holidays. So, like, who's the snowflake, really?
Yeah,
like,
I 100% agree with you. There is identity politics being played out on both sides in both ways, and there is outrage culture and snowflake culture being played out on both sides. When I was growing up, but when I was younger, it was the right that was known for this sort of like, "Oh my God, Jesus and the Christ, and you're offending the Bible." And now I feel like that's maybe subsided a bit, and now the left wing has taken over with all the offense and misgendering and miss this and miss that, and the whole oppression Olympics and blah, blah, blah. So I 100% agree. There's bad qualities, or rather those bad qualities are being exhibited in different ways on both sides of the spectrum. But getting back to that point of this overprotection of, like, for example, the Buddha or the Sleeping Beauty, or now you get college kids who they don't want to hear anything offensive. And now you get this when they go into history class and learn about something about war or slavery or famine or oppression or rape, you have to censor it, or you have to rewrite the history to make it sound more palatable or friendly or sort of less triggering. And I feel like, you know what? This is how a civilization ends, when you can't handle the harsh truths of reality. And that's when you create a whole world, a fake news world, just so you don't get offended, just so you don't get triggered, just so your sensibilities or your perception of reality is not hurt or whatever it is. So you create like a fake world just so you don't get offended. Whereas the real world doesn't care whether you're offended. It doesn't care what's written in your history book. If you live a life, if you live your life in a debaucherous manner or a stupid manner, you're gonna get screwed at the end of the day. Life doesn't care. Nature doesn't care. Hashtag dominance hierarchy. These. No, it's true. It's true. Yeah. That's why I would agree with him, because you know what, man, you can say what you want, you can act what you want, but at the end of the day, there are certain laws in nature. If you don't follow them, they will destroy you, or they will, work against you. I don't want to be so, extreme, but they will work against you. So it's like, when you hear these, and this comes back to what the Jordan Peterson was saying in that Kathy Newman interview, that women need, the typical woman, quote unquote, whatever that means. We know what it means. Just the average woman needs to get their life in order by the age of 35, because if she wants kids, then she needs to be married beforehand. She needs to find the right partner and plan.
I think it was like 25 actually, or something like that. It was like 25 or 30.
Whatever it was. I mean, whatever the age was, the fact that
much less than men.
Yeah,
much less than men.
Exactly. The point is, there is definitely a biological element to this conversation. Now, for you to say, well, hang on a second, I'm an independent woman. I can earn what I want. I can work until when I want, and I can have babies when I want. That's not true. And if you want to live your life and say, well, now I'm 50, I've earned millions of pounds, and now I want to have a kid. Well, good luck, love, but who's going to marry you at 50 and would want kids? I mean, great for you if it happens, but realistically, that's not going to happen. And these are these biological principles or laws of nature that people are now denying because they don't want to be offended, because they want to craft reality around their needs rather than the other way around. And I feel like maybe this is I'm guessing here, where Jordan Peterson maybe was. Why this really struck him, or why this really got under his skin, this whole transgender things. Like, maybe at the base of this whole conversation, this transgender thing is a bit of a misdirection or distraction, but the real core of it is these people are now encroaching upon reality. They're now denying biology, and it's not simply about saying he or she. It's about saying maybe gender doesn't exist, or maybe it's saying, have you watched that film Zootopia? I mean, that is such a propaganda. There's this. I don't know if you watched it or not, but
I haven't. No.
There's a baby. There's a fox and there's a rabbit, right? And the rabbit is this small, and she wants to be a cop, and all the cops are like elephants and buffaloes and bulls and lions, and she got this tiny rabbit, and like, you can be whatever you want to be, whatever, that kind of thing. And it's like, that's great.
I think in a kid,
I can't be 100 meters sprinter. I know. Sorry?
In a kid's cartoon, that's a good lesson to.
Yeah, exactly. You can be whatever you want to be.
You know what Jordan Peterson would say? Jordan Peterson would say that.
Clean your room. Go and clean your room.
Yeah. No, well, he would say that it's good to shoot high and to go for something that seems impossible to you, because you'll at least hit a target somewhere along the line.
Yeah. That could be. I don't know if you. I mean, that could be. I mean, this is a completely hypothetical situation, so you could be right. I don't know, but there was one scene in there which really sort of annoyed me, and I don't really get annoyed by cartoons, whatever films, where there was a baby. I can't remember what animal it was, but it was a tiny, like some rodent sort of animal, and in one cafe, so there was an ice cream parlor, and that ice cream parlor is only for elephants. Right, this was the rule. You have to be an elephant because it's like massive size ice creams, right? And this rodent goes in there and he says, "Oh, when I grow up, I want to be an elephant." Now he's not an elephant; he's some different animal. And the rabbit says, "No. If he wants to be an elephant when he's older, he can be an elephant." Now it's not about you can be a spaceman or you can be the president. That's physically still possible, but I can't say when I grow up I want to be a lion or I want to be an eagle. And someone says, well, yes, you can. You can be an eagle if you try hard enough. Yeah.
There's that over-the-top right-wing comeback of I identify as an attack helicopter.
Yes, of course. Yep, absolutely. And so, go for it, yeah.
Yeah,
but I mean, this is what I was saying. So I can't even remember what the original point was, but the point was Sleeping Beauty, Buddhism, and then Snowflake. So what I'm trying to say is, let people learn the harsh realities of life as early as possible, so they're well prepared, as opposed to sort of hiding them from it. And then when they grow up and when they go out in the world and they realize, oh shit, this is what the world is really like. I'm so underprepared. I did not know that this whole world existed outside, and now I'm in shock, horror. I have to confront these fears, and how am I going to live? And how?
I think there's. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm finished. I'm just going.
Just want to say one thing. Yeah, the big concern I have is when people like Jordan Peterson are denied a platform at universities, at places of higher education, at institutions that were supposed to be where people are allowed to argue and debate, and you have these extreme, I don't even know what to call them, like they come and they completely block him from speaking. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, honestly, that's like I don't even know what to say. It just kills me.
Yeah, like one of the points of university is definitely that it needs to be a comfortable enough place that you can get on with learning. But at the same time, one of the major points of it is that it's supposed to challenge you. So like you have to hear things that upset you. That's just the world. The world is just like that. And that somebody is saying something that upsets you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. It doesn't necessarily mean whatever, right? But the fact that it's like we just can't talk about difficult subjects anymore in some regards. I should be careful saying that because I don't know the depth and breadth of the history of university campuses, but it does feel like you talk about a lot of important things.
I think what you're saying is 100% true, because I mean, even if you look at the whole problem with Islamic extremism and terrorism and this whole Sharia nonsense stuff, because the left has denied, or rather made a conscious effort not to call it out for what it is, just to not talk about it, to even acknowledge its existence, you then hand the conversation over to maybe extremer elements in society who don't care about Muslims, who don't really have a vested interest in reforming Islam or protecting Muslims from their own worst elements. So when you stop talking about these things, then the conversation goes to the underground, or maybe to the more extreme elements in society. And the same is done with race and IQ, is done with gender and IQ, is done with Islamism or extremism. All these, oh my God, I can't talk about this. Why? Why not? What do you have to fear? I mean, so what? I mean, let's talk about it. If what they're saying is not true, then let's have an open discussion and disprove them. But when you have this sort of like, there's some areas that we can't talk about. There are some subjects which we can't talk about. Well, guess what? People will talk about them, and they won't be saying things that you like, or they won't be having those conversations with maybe the correct objective approach that you may like. But because you've silenced yourself voluntarily, what makes you think they're going to do that? They don't care that you're not talking about it, so they definitely will. So you're actually shooting yourself in the foot when you stop talking about certain things and you say, oh no, we can't talk about rape anymore. We can't talk about war. We can't talk about colonialism because it might offend someone who's in the class who maybe was from a colonial country. That's a ridiculous argument. There's not one country or one people that were not colonizers or were colonized.
Yeah.
So I just don't buy that rubbish argument. And with identity politics, I think that is such a poison, an unbelievable poison. Just destroyed any sort of argument in public discourse, because I can say, hey, I'm someone from a Muslim background, I'm someone from Pakistan, so Pakistan was colonized by the British, so you are technically, if you're a British white guy, you are responsible for the oppression of my ancestors. Number one, I've never been oppressed. I was never been in chains. I have. If my ancestors were oppressed, that's them. That's not me. And the same way, now you get people. But I think the identity politics of the left have now created the identity politics on the right. So now, white, like, well, if you guys want to play this game, we'll play the game as well. And now it doesn't look as pretty. Whereas black power, brown power before, now it's white power. Ooh, that doesn't sound quite as exotic anymore. That doesn't sound quite as enticing now. But hey, you set the rules. So when they play the game, don't blame them. You set the rules up in the first place. Over and out.
This is one of the big reasons why I think that that Jordan Peterson is a good thing. And on the whole, like, I mean, there are some things that I'm still mulling and trying to understand how they could be problematic. But on the whole, he has a really positive message, I would say. Maybe maybe positive is the wrong word, but it's really pragmatic, and I think it's important. Anyways, what I was getting to is that he does have a lot of conservatives or people who would call themselves right wing that listen to him, and you hear a lot of the time people, like, it's a common question, like, that people have for him, which is, do you think you're doing enough to distance yourselves from neo-Nazis or something like that? And it's like, if you learn his academic history, his entire career has distanced himself from Nazism, right? So like, so this is a guy that when he goes out to speak, he's not concerned with explaining to anybody that he disagrees with Nazism and thinks it's literally one of the most reprehensible things. So, and you know, one of the reasons why I think that it's good that he doesn't come out and just straight up get into those identity politics and pick a side in his normal speaking, is because if you take what he has to say, first of all, and you're a right-wing ideologue and you listen to what he has to say, a lot of what he's telling you is stop being a right-wing ideologue. A lot of it is like, get your own life in order. Don't think about, or don't try and push these like political agendas and stuff. Don't worry so much about what other people are doing. Let them do the things that work for them. Focus on yourself. And he also brings, like we were talking about, the nice context with the Bible and stuff. But if he came out and he was just and he basically made a point of expressing all the time how reprehensible he was, he would be making the same mistake that Abdullah would be making if every third post on his Facebook were about how Muhammad's a pedophile. He would just be alienating an audience that desperately needs more guidance, which are the right-wing extremists. They desperately need more guidance, and they need a message that they can hear. And Jordan Peterson is finding a way to do that. And I think that's on the whole a really good thing, because it's going to have the effect of turning people away from right-wing extremism. And that means more community support for trans rights, more community support for gay rights, more community support for a woman's freedom to have abortions and stuff like that, because it'll bring these people more to the moderate center at least. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I for some time earlier wasn't. I know he's against Nazism, but the alt-right are not quite Nazi. They're sort of quite there. But anyway, so I wasn't sure what his stance was on the alt-right, and someone asked him, "What do you think of the alt-right?" And he completely, distanced himself in the most clearest possible way, without leaving any room for ambiguity or anything. And I was like, wow, man. And it was a very good answer. He goes, don't cling on to this racial pride. Be proud of something you have done. Identity politics works in two ways, or at least in two ways. You can claim the oppression of your ancestors. So, for example, black people say, oh, I was a slave, I'm a slave. You wear nice trainers, you wear nice shoes, we live in a comfortable life. Your ancestors may have been chained, but you are not born a slave. So you can claim the oppression of your ancestors as well as claiming their achievements. So if a white guy says, oh, Einstein and Mozart, and okay, they're Mozart, they're Einstein, who are you? Right? You aren't not even half of that. So stop claiming their oppression, stop claiming their achievements. What have you done? It goes back to the basics. Clean your room, not someone else's. So I have found his message really good. And the alt-right have publicly, you know, I say disowned him, but rather said, oh, he's not one of us, and you know, he doesn't care about racial pride, and he doesn't care about this kind of stuff, and they don't like him. They very openly disagree with him and make fun of him, which is great. And he said that he has brought people back from the brink. They were considering going to the extreme right or to the extreme left, and he has brought them back. And even though his message is in this world very political or politicized, what he's saying is very practical advice. Yeah. It's not about free market economics, or it's not about government. It's simply, you know, fix yourself up, look at the people around you, do what you can, achieve your goals, and make sure that you tell the truth and you're honest. I think if you are given those basic rules, whichever environment you live in, you will do well. So it's unfortunate that his, I think this is how bad the current state is, that something that Jordan Peterson says, who's a very down the middle of the road kind of guy. He's not a trailblazer like a Milo Yiannopoulos.
He's super center. Like he
is so center, but
he claims liberal.
Yeah, exactly. But he's associated with the alt-right. I mean, that is how crazy the conversation has become. That someone like who is so tame, and he's just a normal, he's a very intelligent and wise guy, but he's a normal guy. He's made out to be like some sort of like monster or some sort of, oh my God, this guy's gonna. But anyway, go ahead.
People point out how oh well, look, there are some people who are somewhat tied to the alt-right that are financially supporting his efforts, and then these publications and stuff that are considered quite right wing. Haven't even had a beer tonight. Jeez. They give him a platform, and but you know, here I am. I'm somebody who I feel like I have a useful message, and my target audience, who are people that I think need to change their ways a little bit, are giving me platforms and then paying me to tell them the message that I believe is going to bring them from their extremist ideological views. Like, of course I'm going to take the money and take the platform. The very target, it's like if Abdullah here was like, oh no, I'm not gonna take a charitable donation from the local mosque and then go do an interview with a scholar up on stage about how atheists aren't terrible people or something. Like that would be like you doing that, Abdullah. Like it's nonsense. Like of course he'll take that support and use it to achieve what he thinks is the best thing to achieve. Like to call him alt-right because he gets paid on Patreon by some right-wing people is kind of nonsense. There's one 100%. Other.
Sorry, go on.
There's one other thing that I wouldn't mind bringing up before we wrap up, which is because we did talk a bit about the transgender issue, and we talked about what Jordan Peterson would say that I think is very much totally in alignment with trans rights. And I want to preface this by saying that I still absolutely think what I'm about to talk about is in alignment with trans rights, and I'm always discussing these ideas and vetting them and looking for people to teach me where I could be wrong. But Jordan Peterson does get to a point where he says that it no longer makes sense to, let's say, simply support the common, or not the common, but some of the common ideological ideas of certain activist groups, I would say. And you really get to the point where we start talking beyond the male, female, and let's say genderqueer or non-binary gender identity. So like when you go beyond he and her and they, and you start looking for more options. And it's like the benefit of having a new option is so that you have a more specific way to identify yourself, right? So there's like the Z and Zer, and there's other pronouns that people would like to use. And so basically you're creating these additional labels for groups. And the only reason why you should have to create a new group is if the groups that exist are not specific enough to you. But gender, we come back to the social contract where, like, if you're respectful to me and I'm respectful to you, then I'm going to say things that are nice to you and be nice to you and use your gender pronouns and things like that. But gender and the language of him and her and he and she and that kind of stuff, it does have like a purpose for communication to some extent, and like there's a social contract there. Part of why we use him and her, for example, is that we as a society or as a culture have kind of agreed to it. And so to start going and making up these new groups and totally changing, like, you can go ahead and try and change culture, but like you're kind of fighting against, you're kind of like alienating yourself in a sense when you really go beyond and you create, if someone comes up to you and they say, can you refer to me as Z? Once again, in my circles of friends, it's something that I would likely honor, but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily argue that it's healthy for that person to identify themselves that way, because if you need to be neutral, then the obvious one is they or them. But if you feel like you need another group, like the end game there is the individual, because you end up finding that you never fit in any group. You have to come down to you as an individual person. Like the individual is the atomic group, like it's the smallest group you can make. So you will always for your entire life be able to say you don't belong if that's the mentality you're approaching it with, until you come to the individual. So in my opinion, and once again, I could end up deciding that I'm wrong about this at some point. I never want to suggest that I really know for sure what's right and what's wrong. But in my opinion, there should be much more focus on respecting individuals rather than creating or hoping to create some infinite subset of groups that we have to like expect society to kind of bend around and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. If we could, sounds simple, but it's not simple. But if we could speak to each other as individuals, and it sounds the obvious, I'm speaking to you as an individual, but you're not, because maybe I'm bringing up all the baggage that maybe was put on me by my society or my community or my race or my culture or my religion, and I have to carry that around with me everywhere I go, and I have to defend it, and I have to. Why am I going to take all that stuff with me? Whether it's just, this is just a funny thing. People are unfortunately most proud of the things that they didn't choose. For example, the gender. For example, that the religion that they were born in, or their race. Why are you proud of things that you didn't achieve or didn't choose? I say proud, but be responsible for the things that you can choose, like your own opinions and your own ideas and your own actions. And that's what it means to be a unique individual. So I would certainly 100% encourage that way of thinking and that way of living, to be an individual. And being an individual does not mean you are selfish. It just means you know who you are and you know what you want, and you are more useful to the people around you as an individual rather than some group collective sort of, amoeba. I mean, you're useless, because if the group goes one way, you go that way. If it goes another way, then you go that way. Where do you stand on a particular issue? That's what I want to know. Not what the group wants you, not where the group wants you to stand, but where do you stand and why? What are your principles? That, I believe, is the foundation of what it means to have a meaningful life, of having purpose in life, and not just following everyone else. But I 100% agree with everything you said, and thank you for the conversation. I would say we should wrap it up, but I always want to go for the questions in the comment section. So if guys, now's your time. You've got any dying questions you want to ask myself, Matt or Abdullah, this is your chance. I just want to, by the way, please, I forgot to mention, please follow Abdullah Samir on his, he's got, I believe, YouTube, definitely got YouTube. So if Abdullah's there, if you can post your link in the comment section. If you've got Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, just post it in there. Matt, do you have anything you want people to follow you on, or?
No, not really. Abdullah put my Facebook in, but I don't know. I'm working on getting my website up and stuff like that.
Listen, so you are now basically famous now because you're on this live stream. So basically, the next time you walk outside your house, you're gonna have to. Paparazzi will be everywhere because you are on this live stream, and now you'll be identified all across the world. So let me just check if there. Someone's asking me, Veedu's chatting breeze, man. Well, that's what Veedu's always chatting breeze. But you just realize that now. Veedu, do a quick Pepsi Haram video with Dr. Zakir Naik. Pepsi Haram. What you would say, Pepsi Haram? Well, I don't understand. What do you? Oh, apparently this is the conspiracy I heard a long time ago. Pepsi stands for Pay Every Penny, Save Israel. So you can make of that whatever you want. Maybe that's a bit too archetypal, reading in between the lines a bit too much. I don't know. Veedu, you should invite some houris into your next live chat. I would if I was dead and in heaven. I don't think I'll make it to heaven for some reason. I've got a funny feeling.
You're a good guy.
I'm a good guy, but I'm not a Muslim. I'm not, who's that preacher? Abu Walid, the coconut chocolate Muslims. I'm one of those guys. And he says, I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for your time and the wise words. Love. 3 a.m. here. Peace. I'm out. Thank you very much. 3 a.m. Wow, where are you watching that from? What's the next movie of the review week from Dr. Zakir Naik? I'm not sure. It might be Beauty and the Beast. It might be Pinocchio. I'm not really sure, if I'm honest. I'll have to watch some movies. I'm not going to answer that question by Pizza Guy. What condom size do you use? Because condoms are haram. So I don't. Can I just say none fit me? Because I'm too small. So this conversation has really deteriorated. Okay, guys. Is there any last thoughts by the two gentlemen? I believe you're gentlemen, unless you've changed your gender halfway through the conversation.
Somebody mentioned Samuel. You should talk about Bilal Phillips on apostasy.
That's why we were here in the first place. Oh yes, of course. Adam, go. Sorry, I'm gonna go for it.
No, there's not too much to really add. I mean, Bilal Phillips has a video he made recently where he was saying that there's a tide of apostasy that's upon us, that if we don't do something about it in Canada, there's going to be like tons of people leaving Islam. So I think it's true. It's happening, day by day. We're seeing the Muslim speakers are actually coming and trying to respond to this threat now, because it's a real crisis, I guess, as they see it. I would say it's a real awakening, right? I mean, how many of us in the last few years have kind of opened up and started thinking outside the box, right? It's a good thing.
I would absolutely agree. And this is, for me, what he said was such a low and desperate sort of message. Like, in Muslim countries, social pressure would have kept these Muslims in check and they wouldn't have been able to live Islam. Is that how weak your message is? Is that how weak your religion is, that you need peer pressure to keep Muslims Muslim? How seriously? You should be ashamed of yourself. That's like basically you're doing your dirty linen in public by saying, guys, our message is crap. So make sure everyone pressurizes these guys onto Islam because the message itself can't stand on its own two legs. How pathetic! You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and Zayshawn is asking about how do we educate people. I think there's multiple ways. There's multiple things you can do to educate people. My approach is to be respectful and to try to dialogue with people in a way that doesn't build barriers. Some people are flamboyant and aggressive and hostile, and they think that works really well. I personally don't think so, but I mean that has some effect as well. Usually, it pisses off people and makes them more religious, in my opinion. But anyways. You just do your different. Everyone just plays a part. Just don't be hostile. Don't force your atheism or your lack of religion down people's throat. Look for the proper context and the proper time to speak about these things. Like, you know what I mean? Don't just like show up at someone's like funeral. Hey, like I want to talk to you about atheism. Can I give you these flyers? Let me tell you about. And his grandfather just died and he's crying, and you're like think about it. Just look at the context and life is not only about atheism or whatever disbelief. People should live their lives, not spend all the waking hours. That's a complaint me and Waleed get all the time. Why do you guys always want to talk about this? Yeah, we're activists, right? So we don't do it all the time, but we do definitely spend a lot of our time on this topic. But that being said, yeah, don't make your whole life into an atheism preaching lifestyle. Like, get some hobbies, do some things in life, make some music or make some fun videos. Sometimes, whatever it is, right? You know what I mean?
I absolutely agree. Someone said, "Will Veedu? What is Veedu's qualifications?" Other than doing a Zakir Naik impression, I have a degree in computer science and a master's in political economy of the Middle East. But I would not call myself a political scientist or a computer scientist. I'm basically a failure. But going back to the question of how do we educate? This is such a. I know where you're coming from with this question, but I sometimes get annoyed because when I went to Pakistan, or when I go to Pakistan, and I see how they're learning. They're just memorizing stuff. Now, technically speaking, they know the answer to the question. So, yeah, they're kind of being educated, but they're not being taught how to think. It's not about learning conclusions or learning it's not about saying to someone 1 + 1 is 2. It's telling them how 1 + 1 is 2. So if they came across 2 + 2, they will know the answer is 4 because they know how to add rather than knowing what the answer to every question is. So it's not about knowing stuff. It's about learning how to think, and that is what I find is massively lacking in the Muslim world and certain third world countries, that they taught conclusions and not principles or methods of how to find stuff or how to question stuff. They don't know how to question stuff. They don't have that culture, unfortunately. So, which is why they're lagging behind in many other things. Forget religion, but also in their politics and in their economics. So yeah, sorry, did you just give me $5? Is that correct? Wow. I kind of feel embarrassed. Well, thank you very much, Abdullah. So basically, I gave Abdullah $10 before this live stream to say, if you publicly give me $5, it'll make me look good. So that's a hint to you guys to sort of come on, up your game, guys. Thanks, Abdullah. I'll transfer the money.
I'll just say that Waleed is doing a fantastic job creating original content. Funny content and creative, videos that have a message behind them, right? So it's not just joke videos. It's actually there's some seriousness there as well, right? So I definitely think you guys should support him as much as you can. Maybe he'll do a lot more, make a lot more better, high quality content videos. Not to say content's not high quality or good as it is. But this stuff is expensive, right? Like I've done videos for a while. I don't do to the level of Waleed, but the camera equipment is expensive, video equipment, like editing software, it's like what I'm paying $50 a month for Adobe or whatever. it's not, this stuff is not cheap, and you know, we should support people that are doing something good. And
Abdullah, thank you so much for the business pitch. I really appreciate that. I'm humbled by your support. But yeah, guys.
Yes, because
I mean, it cost a lot of money to get me in here too. So
man, that $5 has gone straight to Matthew's pocket, as I say. Just to pay for that expensive, that groomed beard and that painting behind him. And I love the fact that he's positioned in the perfect way that we can't see her breasts. So that's a really good. She's covered. MashaAllah. That's good. That's good. That's good as well. Okay. But yeah, guys, honestly, thank you so much for your support. If you can't give me a penny, that's not a problem. Just share the videos. You know, partake in the sort of comments, spreading it, liking it, sharing it. Just having the conversation is for me is what keeps me going. And I want to thank you, Abdullah, for giving me the $5. I'll give you that. I'll transfer that to you later. And thank you for our special guest, Matthew. Thank you both for coming on, and thank you for everyone in the comments who's watching this stream, who's taking the time out to watch us guys. It really is enjoyable. I hope you've learned something. I've learned so much personally from you guys and from the comments about all sorts of stuff, which is probably not very PC or very appropriate or even useful. But I've certainly learned some stuff. But thank you guys once again. I really appreciate it. I'll do definitely more of these in the future. And if Matthew and Abdullah want to come on again, that is, for me, that is great. It's been a pleasure hosting you guys. And we will see you very soon. So, guys, I think we should call it a night. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.